Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with Joe Bucaro. Let's get started. So we're going to start off talking about how we became partners in Third Wheel Consulting and just kind of our journey up until this point, and prior to being business partners.
Yeah, and so we realized today when we were talking about it, we started in January of 2018, I think was the official start date of Third Wheel Consulting, which is wild because that's over 5 years ago.
Yes.
Which it seems crazy to me. But yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about why we formed Third Wheel Consulting. And there were a couple reasons, but the main one was really, so Amber and I are both social workers. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, but in the social work field, at least the social work field in Dayton, Ohio, where we live, there's just not a lot of formal mechanisms for training, for development, for mentoring, and it seems like we're all kind of thrown into often these really tough and impossible, kind of emotionally grueling jobs, and there's just no formal way to prepare you for that, to support people in that. And we kind of had these careers up until 2018 that were marked by just figuring it out as we go and messing up a lot, right? Which caused us to get better. And we thought, we were working together at the time, and we're like, what if we created, just a way to help social workers train, learn, mentor them, support them. And that was the idea for Third Wheel Consulting. Right?
Yep. That is where we started. And we were hoping that, we could provide that training, which we have. And we have lots of online offerings and in-person offerings for different types of training, everything from leadership trainings to topic-specific things for social workers to self-care at this point. And hoping to expand that list, but also just working with organizations to kind of create plans for their employees to learn, basically, learn different skills, be able to stay with an organization and move up in that organization and have good leaders. So that's kind of where we started. We can both talk about our journey a little bit here. Before I came to the organization where I met Jill, I was in children's services. Prior to that, I worked in residential services. Wasn't a social worker for a good long part of that because I didn't have my degree, but I worked in those social service fields, and really found that they gave you some basic training on how to not get hurt,
right?
How to not get hurt and how to document some things, and you better document them quick and in a hurry, but there wasn't a lot of other things. There wasn't any professional development, or if you start supervising other staff, what do you even do with them? And I know when I first became a supervisor, I felt like I would be okay because I had watched other supervisors and been like, well, that's not right, so I won't do that. But also, when I got into it, I was making mistakes left and right. I mean, I apologize to all of my very first employees because I wasn't the supervisor I am now. I wasn't the leader I am now. And I was focusing a lot on things that people were focusing on with me, where it was is your paperwork done? Is this, task stuff done? Instead of finding out, are you happy at your job? What do you want to be doing? And helping to develop them, because that's really what keeps an employee and keeps them motivated to do the work, is when they are invested in that organization more than just receiving that paycheck for the contract of employment.
Yeah, absolutely. I say that all the time. I'm I feel bad for every single client I had the first 2 years of my career, and I want to say sorry to them, and I want to say sorry to the first couple of teams that I supervised. And, I think the whole point in starting Third Wheel is that hopefully we can help support people throughout. I mean, nobody is going to start a new job or a new role and not mess up, right? And certainly you want to get better as you're in that role. That's the whole point. But if we can mitigate some of that just absolute train wreckiness, right? And just like learning by mistakes, that's what we want to do, because these are people's lives we're talking about, right? Like when you're in the social work field, you're working with vulnerable people, and you want the people that are working with vulnerable people to be good at their job, or to at least be supported in their job. And the same thing for when you're supervising, right? Like all those reasons you said, you want people to be happy, because happy people do better work. And that's what we need to be doing. So, okay. So Amber, so you were at Children's Services for how long before you came to Daybreak?
I was at Children's Services for about 12 years. And prior to that, I did about 2 years in residential services for at-risk youth that were like older teenage youth. So it was like, it wasn't lockdown residential, but it was pretty daggone close. And that was in upstate New York. So that was kind of my first touch into any type of social service, really. And then moved to Children's Services and worked in their group homes, and then in their independent living program for the next 12 years before I went to Daybreak.
And during that 12 years, that's when you went back to school and got your bachelor's of social work.
Yes. So I got my associate's. Actually, the first thing that I did was I was like, guess what? I'm going to be a nurse.
Oh.
And so I went to all of nursing school except for the like practicum part of it.
You passed all those science classes and stuff?
Oh, there were multiple attempts, but yes, I did eventually pass them all, and got the social work school to accept those as my science credits, which was wonderful. Anatomy and physiology, super hard. But I'm glad that I did it, because, just, looking back on that, it does help me understand certain things about, clients and service delivery when you can understand the human body, like, just kind of like on a basic level. Like, I am not a doctor by any means, but on a basic level, I do understand it. So I'm happy that I did that. But in any case, I started off, I was like, guess what? I'm going to be a nurse. and I got pregnant with my my last child, and was going to deliver when my name came up on the list to do the practicum. That was her due date fell into that window, and at the time the wait list for nursing was so long that they didn't care, and so they were like, baby, no baby, don't care if you don't show up for this. You have to go start over again on the wait list. And I was like, well, that doesn't sit well. And then I just did a little bit of soul searching and realized, like, what are you even doing right now? You're working in this field and you like it. Why aren't you getting a degree in social work? So, transferred all those credits and went into my associate's degree, and then went into my bachelor's degree in social work, all while I was there at Children's Services.
Nice. And then when did you start? So then you were at Children's Services, and I remember I was already at Daybreak, and we'll talk a little bit about my journey to Daybreak in a minute, but we had an opening come up for an outreach case manager at Daybreak, which would be like a case manager that would work with the youth and young adults who are living on the streets or in the adult shelters. And my boss at the time, who became your boss later,
right,
we were like, who can we get to fill this position? And she had worked at Children's Services. Yes. And she's like, oh my gosh, there's this great woman who is in charge of their independent living program over there, and I think we should try to steal her. And I'm like, let's do it. So then she reached out to you, and I guess you decided to make the jump.
Yeah. It was actually perfect timing. If anybody has worked in Children's Services or worked with me in Children's Services, we all know it's a very stressful place. Sometimes it feels like the Wild West. Sometimes there are, it's a governmental agency, so there's politics involved, especially when you get up to a supervisory level. And at the time, when Darlene called me, or maybe I called her, I don't remember, because I had been looking at Daybreak for quite a while, but just was kind of like, I'm okay where I am. And at the time that all this happened, some real wild shit went down at Children's Services, and I was like, okay, I'm ready today. And I think literally I had a phone call with her in the evening. I applied in the morning. I had an interview within a couple of days. I was offered, I mean, I think it all happened like really within about a 10-day period of time that I had an offer and had put in my notice with Children's Services. So definitely was some type of divine intervention there that I was, you know, it wasn't like I was searching. It was, and much of my life has been this way where it's like, oh, maybe I want to do something. And then when I actually do it, it takes about, 2 weeks to make it happen. So yes, definitely. And was so happy to make that jump to Daybreak into case management. And actually, that's the first time I had ever done case management.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, I always like direct service and those types of things, but never had done case management. So that was new.
Yeah. Yeah. And then because we were on that same team for a couple months, and that's when I was going to leave Daybreak. We won't bore all the podcasters with that wild story, but we didn't work together long before I had put in my notice to leave.
Right.
But then had a couple, wild things happen personally and got offered a different job to come back to Daybreak. So then we weren't on the same team anymore. But Daybreak, those of you that know it, it's small. Like if you both work at the agency, you see each other all the time. And then, we worked together, for about a year, maybe a little less. And then that's when you had approached me like, what do you think about starting this training and consulting business? Which, like, looking back now is like, we were cool at Daybreak.
Yeah.
Like I would call us like we worked well together.
Yep.
But I wouldn't call us like work besties or
No.
anything.
No. And I
Daybreak.
remember reaching out to you and thinking like, I know Jill, but I don't know her that well, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask. Like, and she might think I'm some kind of weird freak. I don't know.
I remember you asking me, and I was kind of like, I was like really honored. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe she thinks that I would be good at having a training and consulting business. But yeah, it was like a little out of nowhere, but it's just so cool because look where we ended up today. So, that is pretty awesome. So that's how Amber got there. We should probably talk a little bit about how I got there.
Yeah.
And I feel like my journey is really just kind of about like stumbling into it. But long story short, I also did not go to school initially for social work. I went to school initially, like, for lack of a better idea, because I had free tuition to go to UD because my dad worked there, and, that's what you're supposed to do right after high school. So off I went to UD, and I always joke and say, like, I feel like I studied hard, I worked hard, I got good grades, but I feel like there was no forward thinking at all. Like, I was having a really nice time. I was partying quite a lot, hanging out with my friends, living my best life. I got a degree in international studies. And at some point in there, I was thinking about social work because I did picked up a minor in social work because at UD you can't get a degree in social work. There's no BSW.
Oh.
Yeah, no BSW at UD. But I had figured out by then that a lot of social workers go on to get their masters. So kind of get this liberal arts undergrad and then eventually I could get my master's. And I was thinking a lot about international social work. And I had actually, when I graduated, I had a job to go to Africa for 9 months. And I was going to do like community development and stuff there. And, I just like left college and went back to my parents' house. Like I went to Daytona Beach with all my friends the week after graduation and like came back with like probably like $200 and like, some like dirty clothes. And that's about it at age 22 that I had. And I worked all summer to get ready to go to Africa. And then I got like really sick. And we won't bore people with this either, but I got mono. And then I had one of those cases where like I didn't recover for like 9 months.
Wow.
Like my blood cell counts like never got back to normal. And I couldn't go because we have to remember this was in 2011 when there was still like a really bad HIV crisis, right? In sub-Saharan Africa. And I couldn't just go with like all my mono germs to this like to be with all these people who were so immunosuppressed, right? If they had HIV. So that got canceled. And so then I just like wandered around and like worked at Victoria's Secret. And after a year, I was like, well, I should probably do something with my life, and decided to get my master's in social work. So I started my master's program, and they asked me where I wanted to do my field placement. And I said, all along, I was like, the only thing I don't want to work with homeless people, and I don't want to work with kids. I said, that's all I said. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. I was always interested in like corrections and criminal justice and maybe even like some private practice work. But I'm like, no kids and no homelessness. And they're like, good news. We got you a practicum at Daybreak. The youth homeless shelter in Dayton. And I was like, well, fuck it. Let's do it. So, did my practicum at Daybreak, got hired on pretty quickly after I started an internship there, fell in love with it and the work and the kids / young adults, and was there ever since 2013. I was at Daybreak. So yeah, I'd been there, about 4 years when you joined the team. And yeah, at Daybreak, I was a case aide. I was a case manager. I did clinical work and was like a social worker. And that's when you came. I was doing like case management stuff.
Yeah.
And I was starting some of our newer programs, like the intensive case management program, an in-reach program where we went into the adult shelter. So they let me for a couple years kind of do some exploratory stuff. And then really when we started Third Wheel, that's when we had both kind of moved into these leadership positions at Daybreak.
Right.
And I think we saw both the issues that we were facing, like the struggles we as, I would call us at that point mid-level managers were having. And then also just the issues with our team and like the lack of training for these people that had just like such important jobs and were working with such like high risk people and such sick people. And right then too, we were at the height of the opiate overdose epidemic and our clients were dying. I mean, the 2017, 2018 were some crazy times. And that was kind of like the nexus in which we like formed this and started thinking about like what gaps do we need to fill in.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I feel like the first thing, we looked at was that leadership training.
Right.
And that's when we did the leadership 101 and 102, which is like one, just like how do you supervise people?
Right.
Like how are you there for them? How do you make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? How are you even just like communicating things that are going on at the agency level? How are you making sure people are getting trained, all of that stuff? And then 202 was like, how do you deal with employees who are having performance issues?
Right.
Which, always it's a problem when employees have a performance issue, but when they are literally the ones who are like housing people off the streets,
right,
you need to correct that quickly.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think, when we moved into those positions, I mean, I had been in supervisory positions when I was at Children's Services, and I'm really grateful for that because of the structure that you get in a governmental agency around performance issues, right? I mean, it is like, people will tell you if they work in the government, it takes an act of God to fire someone, right? And I mean, not that the goal ever is to fire anyone, but you have to have a lot of good documentation for HR to show that there is a problem, with client, or with not the clients, but the employee. And a lot of times as supervisors, you've got so much going on, you don't keep that documentation. You're like, I did have this conversation. I did send this email. I did tell them they need to do this. But HR is like, well, we don't want to get sued. So,
right.
And so with our training, we tried to work that in so that there was, you're doing that documentation all the time because, the goal is that we improve someone, right? We help them through that professional development to get to a place where they are having wonderful performance at your organization. But sometimes that doesn't happen. And not only should you be supporting that employee through it, but keeping that documentation for your organization, because I think that's the sticking place that supervisors get in, is you are, trying to take care of this team of people and do what's right for them, but then you also have to do what's right for your supervisor, your organization, your leadership as well. And that's where, sometimes it can feel super overwhelming, but, we wanted to create something to teach people, like, how do you live in that middle section and not become so overwhelmed by, serving your employee and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like, how do you make time for your employees? How do you have like those hard conversations? I know for me, like having like it's funny to watch like how much you've grown, right?
Yes.
As a person.
Yes.
And like Jill of 6 or 7 years ago, like the thought of like telling somebody on my team, like, you didn't do this right, or like
Yes.
you messed up, which is fun. Anybody who works for me now is like, oh, Jill has no problem telling me when I don't do something right. But when you become a leader, and I think we're probably going to have more social workers than anybody else listening to that. Like, we are not typically like confrontational and aggressive people by nature, but I feel like we started to really say like, here are some easy ways to like set up these conversations so it doesn't have to be scary or mean or punitive. It's just like, let's have a conversation about how we could have done this better, right? Or like, how can I support you because X, Y, and Z is not getting done.
Right.
And I think, you can't, unless you have the most perfect team ever, which just like doesn't exist, you're always going to have those conversations. And
I have the most perfect team right now.
My team is perfect also. I say that all the time because my supervisor under me, she just left on maternity leave, and everybody's like, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, I have the most perfect team ever. Of course I'll be okay. But, part of the reason they're so good is, one, because they're awesome and amazing. And two is because, like, I've been having those conversations with them from the start, right? And being like, let's be honest. Like, what do you need from me? And let me be honest with you. Like, this is where you're doing really well, and this is where, we could stand to improve a little bit.
And I think, too, I've had a lot of different teams, and there were points in time where I was like, my team is a train wreck. Early in my career, my team is a train wreck. And now I realize that if I'm going around saying my team's a train wreck, that's a reflection on me as a leader.
Yep.
And it's also what I am saying is going to happen, right? I'm going to have a train wreck team. And now I don't do that because I'm like, no, I know my team. Like, I've spent time building relationships with them and rapport with them, and I understand them, and they understand me, and they understand the expectations of their job. And so I can look at all of them and be like, you are all wonderful in your roles.
Yes. Because
I know you, and I'm not just focusing on like this thing that you aren't doing exactly like I want you to do. Because sometimes, as leaders, we're like, I want you to do it, and I want you to do it my way.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes we got to let go of that control, because if it's getting done, and it's getting done correctly, but it's not the way that you would do it, well, who cares?
Who cares? You taught me that. I'm like, no, I think they should do it my way.
Yeah, I think they need to cross the T this way.
That T, the crossing they didn't do it the way I would do it. And I think, and we probably shouldn't get into this now, but we should totally table this for another conversation. It's talking about like how when you do your own work, which I know is what we're going to talk about a lot on this podcast, it's been so funny to watch like the energy of my teams change, like as I've gotten healthier.
Yes.
And it's funny because now I feel like we're all at a place where we're super healthy, but like when I was undergoing that transition, like they were undergoing.
Yes.
It was just wild. And that's like something we should talk about too, because to be a good leader, you not only have to like do all the things that a good leader does, like you have to do all of your internal work too, because otherwise you're going to be bleeding out all over all the people that you're in charge of, which I think, when we talk about some of the other things that we've kind of moved into with Third Wheel, we came up with our self-care training, which I feel like has kind of gone from like this project we always wanted to do to kind of like the center and like the main thing that we talk about is like how to be healthy in this role, right? Like how to have a job that is impossible, which I feel like social workers now have jobs that are impossible. They were impossible at the beginning, and now with just the way the world is and systems are right now, they're like 3 times more impossible. Like, how do you keep yourself healthy? And then we talk a lot about like, how do you keep your organization healthy? Or how do you structure policies in such a way that like you, inspire people to be healthy or make it possible, I guess, for them to be healthy. And so it was interesting to kind of watch that transition, because that's a huge piece of what we do now. As well. And I feel like, we do the leadership stuff. And actually, I feel like the leadership stuff, it's been interesting. we're seeing a big uptick in like,
yeah,
in demand for that,
Right.
that content. It's been interesting to watch that, you know. And I wonder if that has to do with some of the workforce shortage and crisis, that
Right.
people are getting promoted quickly without the training that they need.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've seen a lot of interest, I think, in that topic lately. But yeah, we've been doing a lot of self-care work and
yeah.
then just our regular consulting kind of stuff as well.
And I want to piggyback kind of on what you said about like as you start becoming more well as a leader, your team kind of follows suit. But I think also like part of that is that I have to start recognizing that I am a leader and that people are watching and they are following what I'm doing, because I think sometimes we're kind of in that place of like, nobody really cares. Nobody thinks that I'm good. Nobody thinks that I'm a good lead. Like nobody's trying to follow me. They're, everybody's just trying to like maneuver around me and like make me happy. Right. And, at some point as you're doing that wellness work, you start to realize like, oh no, I'm like a real whole person here that other people look at as a whole person. And that can be scary initially because you're like, oh crap, I'm like, I am a leader. What am I going to do now?
Right. Well, and I think too, it was so interesting, back when I first started in my role where I am now, which we haven't even talked about what we're doing now, but it was busy. We were building a program. We were working all the time. And I was working on the weekends. I was working on the evenings. We were just grinding. And, we did that, our very first self-care training with the St. Vincent staff, over 2 years ago. 2 years ago?
No,
a
it was
a year ago.
It hasn't even been a year. It was the beginning of this year.
No, it was the beginning of 22.
Okay.
It was beginning of 22. You're right. It was like February, March of 22. And I remember we did that training and I'm like, dude, why am I even giving this training? Because my self-care is atrocious. Like it was certainly, I always joke like do as I say, not as I do. Right. But I think I realized like truly when we gave that training, I left and I was like, Jill, like you've got to make some changes. And it was interesting to see like all of last year, like I stopped sending emails on the weekends and all of a sudden everyone stopped sending. There's not an email from the public defender's office social work team that comes out on the weekend. Every once in a while, like, if I know people are flexing their time because they have something going on, like maybe on a Sunday evening, 1 or 2 things. But I mean, it used to be constant.
Yeah.
And that's what you said is so true. Like people are looking at you for direction. And I remember when I first stopped working on the weekends, there was almost like a little bit, like my team seemed like a little pissed, like almost like a little abandoned, right? Like what the heck? Like I thought we were all grinding all day long. And then like where the heck is like our chief grinder? You know what I mean? And, but then it's been wild to watch how we've all just chilled out. And I don't, because I hate when people are like, oh, like just when you start taking care of yourself, everything falls into place. Like, let me make it very clear here.
No.
I started taking care of myself and we also got what we needed, right? We got more positions, we got better pay, we got all of those systemic things that you need to have for self-care. Because you can't just work in like a dumpster that's on fire and like, fucking meditate and everything gets better.
No.
So let me please like give the disclaimer here. Not only did I change, but things in our program and our system changed as well to allow that. But I mean, there's enough to do, right? That we could continue grinding forever, but we chose not to.
Yeah. Definitely our self-care training. I love doing the leadership trainings. I love doing all trainings. I was talking to a group of people the other day in a meeting, and we were talking about trainings and we were talking about like talking to the media and things like that. And I'm like, I just love a performance. Like I just want to talk about things to other people that are important to me. Like I don't want to just talk about bullshit. Like I want to talk about some real stuff. But I just love it. And but our self-care training since we've started doing that has just been, I mean, I learn something every time I do the workshop, every time I do our groups, every time I do my individuals with people. I learned something new about myself, and just to witness those sparks in other people where they're like, oh, I didn't even consider that it was possible to not send an email on the weekend.
Right. And it's like, it's not even like it's not like don't send an email on the weekend. There's something about our training, and I don't know how we did it because it wasn't like intentional, but there's something about our training that like unlocks the compulsion to send the email.
Yeah.
It's not like don't send the email, because for my whole life, people are like, don't send the email. Work's done when it's done.
Right.
You know, like shut your laptop, leave your work phone at home or at work, and you're like, shut up, you know, like whatever,
Right.
like you don't understand. But there's something about that training that like unlocks like the need, like the compulsion or like the perceived control, right? Like the control you think you have, but we all know you don't have.
Yeah.
And it is like the first time we did it, I remember I looked at you afterwards and I'm like, dude, that was fucking fire.
Yes.
Like that. I mean, you know, we've done trainings and I was like, oh man, that was good. Or I'm like, that's good, but we should change X, Y, and Z. And we like finished and I was like, that was gold. Never change it.
Yes.
Don't do anything ever.
Yeah.
And I was just like in awe. And I don't know how we did it. I mean, I'm sure the universe, you know, sprinkled a little divine intervention in that. But the way that it just unlocks that for people in our field is incredible. I do. Every time I leave, it's like you get like a little hit. Like I feel high. Like it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, well, not a lot of it, but some of it is that we talk about the why. We're always talking about, like, if you're doing something that's not serving you, you've got to look at the why. Like, why are you doing that? What is serving you out of that why? Because we never do anything that doesn't serve us in some way, but it might be in a way that, like, we're not intending. And so, you know, we really kind of dig into that a little bit in that workshop where we talk about the why and what we would rather be doing to get that need met. You know, as we talk about like a numbing behavior opposed to something that is serving us. And so I think that kind of helps people, like you said, like unlock those pieces where it's like, oh, I don't have to do that because I could do this other thing that actually fills me up. Because we're always going to have the compulsion to do the thing that is going to be soothing, right? But it's like, sometimes we do things that don't serve us long term, and then sometimes we can choose other activities. And I think when we do that workshop, we really talk about like the difference between those two things and just being able to recognize it, even if you're not willing to change it or you don't feel like you can change it right now. Just seeing it for what it is so helpful to finding that more, you know, like peaceful state where you don't feel like you're always stressed and running.
Yeah, and I think it gives people this place to kind of like pause and just like bring awareness to what they're doing. Like, I don't know if until the last couple of years, like I even ever thought super critically about what I was doing and why. Because I think when you do work that's hard, or when you work in a job that inherently has more work than can be done in a 40-hour week or a 50-hour week or a 60-hour week, you get so quickly into survival mode where you're just trying to check things off the list. You're just trying to make it to the next day, right? You tell yourself every week, like, this is just a bad week. This is just a bad week.
Right.
Next week it'll be better. And you're like, wow, like 3.5 fucking years have gone by. And it actually has never gotten better. But I think the training really like somehow it snaps people out of that. And they gain that awareness for a minute to be like, holy crap, like what the heck is really going on? You know, what am I really doing? To your point, why am I doing it?
Right.
And just even that awareness when you kind of click into that and you get to keep it for a couple of days, I think that that's what gives you the tools that you need to start making the changes, to start changing this behavior, that behavior. And what I love about our training, and we probably shouldn't get deep in it for this intro one, is just like how we just make it so practical, right? Like you could literally just change like one tiny thing. Like you could buy yourself a Yeti, right? And that could like be a game changer for like hydration and like energy, you know? And I just love how we've really got it kind of boiled down to just those little tweaks that can make a huge, huge difference.
Right. And I, just as we were talking and I was thinking about, our supervision trainings and our self-care trainings and how we got to creating those. And I think it came from, and I like to call them tower moments where like the world, burst into flames and everything fell down around you. I know that for me, I've had a lot of those tower moments in supervision. And then also in that self-care realm that have led me to be like, I want to show people how to do this differently so they don't have to have those tower moments.
Yes.
So they could try to avoid that, because we also know, change is going to happen in everybody's life. And that's what we talk about in our self-care training. Expect the change. Don't be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened, because it will, and have a plan for it. But the change doesn't have to always be so drastic and terrible.
Yes.
But when we keep pushing it off, when we have that knowing of something is not right, I need to do something different, and we're like, I'll just wait, it'll be better next week, it'll be better next week, and then 3 years go by, and then next thing you know, your whole life is falling down around you. You had signs before that to,
Yes.
to kind of make some changes and avoid that major blow up for yourself. But sometimes that's, we all sometimes need that, right? Because it's like, we're not going to look. I'm not going to look over there. I'm not going to look over there until over there becomes everything around me.
Right.
And so, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I think we were looking at that self-care training, not only because we could see it in the field, that, we could see the people we were supervising and our colleagues in the field, and just seeing that, for lack of a better word, just overall melting of people.
Yes.
Over this, level of stress and poor work-life balance, and feeling like they need to do everything all the time for everyone. But we also saw it, in ourselves, and how things were progressing in our lives and how things were changing in our lives. And I think that, kind of led us into that space, and being able to develop a workshop that was so applicable and wasn't just like, P.S. take some bubble baths and, go to the spa,
right.
Once a month, and you'll be fine.
Right. Don't check your emails after 5
right.
p.m. Yeah. It's just this actual, just awareness and being in tune with not only what you're feeling, what's happening around you, and just being awake. You know, I think so many of us, and me for so long, it was I was just totally sleeping on my whole life. I was just living in the perpetual, it will get better next week. It will get better next week. Oh, my relationship is crumbling. It'll get better next week. Right. I just can't think about that right now. Right. And I think so many of us, in the social work field, when you do work that is as meaningful, right, and as powerful as the work that we do, it can be so easy to hyper focus on that.
Right.
And to be this is why I'm ignoring my partner, or this is why I'm ignoring my kids, or this is why I can't deal with my mom today because they don't understand how important my job is. And then you hyper focus on the job and you lose yourself and you lose the people that are important to you.
Right.
And what I found is, when I am a better partner, a better daughter, a better friend, I'm also a better social worker.
Yes.
And if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I'd be like, you're a fucking idiot.
My
clients need 100% of me all the time.
And we look at our clients, and a lot of, they are very vulnerable populations of people. Truly, the things that you're doing with them sometimes are the difference between them being alive or being dead, right?
Sure.
And so, sometimes it's it's very easy to do that hyper focus and say, I am the only thing that is standing between you and, and dying or something like that. And, and then it's very easy to say, well, everyone else in my life's going to have to take a back seat to this because clearly this is more important.
Yeah.
And, it takes a lot of soul searching and a lot of learning about yourself and letting some of those old stories go, because at the end of the day, if I don't take care of myself, I might be able to take care of that one client, but all the, 300 other ones behind them, the thousands of other ones behind, I'm not going to get to them because I'm going to be a crumbled mess.
Yes. Yes. The people that are coming in 10 years or 12
Right.
years or 15 years.
Right.
You know, or even the people that are coming at the end of the day. They do all those studies. So my mom is an ER nurse, and they've done a lot of studies on, like, because now they want nurses to work like these 12-hour shifts, right? Because it's easier to staff, right? We have all these staffing shortages. Long story short, they find that the care that is given in those final 4 hours is like infinitely worse than the care that is given
I'm sure.
at the beginning of the shift, because you're just done. And it's not that people aren't trying.
Right.
They're giving their 100%, but
Right.
their 100% on hour 13 is not the same as their 100% on hour 2.
Right.
And that's what I think we have to think about too. Like, you know, I'm like, I worked 16 hours today. Like, look at all these people I saved, which is that's so problematic too, right?
Yes.
We need to unpack
Yes.
that in another one. This like weird thing that a lot of us social workers think that our clients like need us.
Yes.
That's like a whole nother episode. But you think that, and it's like, what were you like? Was what you were doing on hour 13, 14, and 15, Jill, like really that effective?
Right.
Because I wonder if it was.
Right.
Or if you would have just like gone the fuck to bed and woken up the next morning and done it then, perhaps like everyone would have been happier.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think it is. It's just like finding that balance.
Yeah. And hopefully you all can hear through our conversation that, you know, a lot of our trainings are workshops, our consulting is all through this trauma-informed lens, is all through this supportive lens, to recognize not only, you know, the trauma that we're witnessing, but also the trauma that we have experienced, whether that's in our personal life or that's vicariously through our clients, that we're always attending to that when we're looking at the trainings that we're doing, when we're doing our consulting work. Because if you take that piece out and pretend like everyone is a robot, that's where we get into these places where it's grind, grind, grind. You can do this all the time, and we're not taking care of ourselves anymore.
No, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, God, we've been like talking for a minute at this point, but I do feel like there's some good conversation, and maybe we do this next time to kind of talk about like, so we were at Daybreak, right, in 2018, and then kind of what got us here. Because a lot of this work that we've talked about today and some of those tower moments, which like for those of you that don't do tarot, like a tower moment is just like when everything goes to shit all at once. Like when your entire life goes down in flames. And I feel like between you and I, like we've had quite a few tower moments.
Yeah.
Between January of 2018 and what, September, whatever the heck.
Whatever 17th. Today is.
September 17th, 2023. And I think it would be interesting to unpack some of those, because I think if Jill and Amber in January of 2018 were listening to this conversation, they'd be like, what are these bitches talking about? You know?
Yeah.
So I think that would be cool to unpack too. And I'm just excited to do this little podcast with you.
Yes, this is going to be, I'm super excited, and I'm hoping that, at some point we might have other people on our podcast to talk about things. We don't know.
We have no idea what we're doing.
We're not
any
sure
ideas,
yet.
Let us know. Drop a comment or shoot us a message.
Yep. Anything you want to hear us talk about, anything that you're like, I know that Jill and Amber know about this, I would love to hear their wisdom or their thoughts on it. We would be happy to talk about whatever topic you're interested in.
Yeah. We got our little list, but we definitely need to add to it. And thanks for joining us, those of you that did. And we'll get back with you soon.
Yep. Share it with your friends.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.